Gold has been a store of value for thousands of years. It's shiny, it's scarce, and entire economies, not even economies, entire empires have been built off this metal object. So why is it in 2025 a first edition base set Charizard can sell for over $300,000, whereas 1 ounce of gold is worth less than $4,000? How can cardboard outshine one of the oldest assets in human history? You know the drill. Today we are breaking it down through the lens of economics, from scarcity and nostalgia all the way to human behavior and irrational hype. And in this video we will find out why Charizard isn't just a piece of cardboard, but it is a financial goldmine in the modern era. Welcome back to episode 2 of Pokéconomics, where cardboard meets capitalism. In episode 1 we covered, are we in a Pokemon bubble? And in episode 2 we will be answering the age-old question, why are Charizards worth more than gold? So let's start with the basics of where does value come from, and normally it comes from the concept of scarcity and supply. Now you see, gold gets its value from scarcity. There's only so much gold in the ground and mining it is super expensive. But here's the difference. As demand increases and gold prices rise, we can start mining for more gold, and eventually more gold will come onto the market. Now when it comes to economic graphs, this is what we would call a supply curve. As you can see, it slopes upwards. Therefore, as prices rise, more supply enters the market. Now with a card like the first edition base set Charizard, the opposite is true. You see, the supply of Charizard cards was locked in 1999. No matter how high that price goes, the quantity of first edition Charizards are fixed. Therefore, on a graph, our supply curve looks a bit different. It is a vertical line, what we also call a fixed supply curve. Therefore, no matter how much demand increases, that supply is locked. But the hole gets deeper there, because within that fixed population, that fixed supply, condition also reduces the supply quantity. Out of all the Charizards ever printed, only a handful have ever hit a PSA 10 condition. In fact, only 120. This causes our supply curve to shift inwards, and when demand rises against a fixed curve like that, prices just don't increase, they explode. Now you're probably sitting at home scratching your head asking, what does any of this mean? Well, let's put together the lessons to explain why all of this matters. On the left hand side you will see a graph in which we will assume an equilibrium where the price and quantity is the same for both a Charizard card and an ounce of gold. Now what happens when we increase demand? Well, more gold can enter the market. Therefore, the price of gold increases, and so does the quantity. This increase in quantity helps absorb some of the demand pressure. Therefore, the price of gold increases by a little bit. In the case of the Charizard card, supply is fixed. As a result, all of the demand pressure has to be absorbed by the price action. This results in a larger price increase compared to gold, despite facing the same demand pressures. Now hands down, these supply curves that we've just covered are the biggest factor in answering why is Charizard worth more than gold. However, in the rest of this video we're going to cover some additional economic theories which also play a role in this question. So let's start off with emotion. For the 90s kids, pulling a Charizard in that base set pack was like winning the lottery. It was power, status, and bragging rights all in one. And fast forward 20 years later, those kids are now adults with disposable income. Economists call this the nostalgia premium. This is the extra value people are willing to pay to unlock that feeling deep inside of nostalgia. And in economics terms, we call that an increase in utility, because utility isn't the physicalness of the actual card, it's that feeling we've just described. Now in a normal market, the amount someone wants to pay is tied to the function of the object. So for example, heating. How much do you want to pay to stay warm in the winter? When you pay for heating, you know what you're getting. You're getting real life utility. But as discussed, when it comes to collectibles, that utility isn't physical. It is tied to memory, meaning, and status. As a result, that shifts the demand curve higher, meaning someone will pay more for that item. Therefore, gold might be shiny, but it doesn't remind you of being on the playground and trading Pokemon cards, a feeling you'll never get again unless you buy that Charizard card. Now, we talked about Charizards being a status symbol. Just like a Rolex, just like a Ferrari, just like a Van Gogh painting, having a Charizard is a symbol of power. I mean, Logan Paul wears one around his neck. We've literally turned cardboard into clout, and economists have a term for this. It is called Veblen goods. These are items that become more desirable as the price rises because they're expensive. You see, in a normal market, when the price rises, demand usually falls. But with Veblen goods, the higher price signals you to buy more. As a result, demand increases. You see, Veblen goods flip the whole theory of demand and supply on its head, because instead of expensive prices scaring away buyers, it is now attracting more buyers into the pool. And this point of inversion is usually called the Snob effect. So yeah, pretty creative. You see, gold just sits in a vault, but Charizards sit on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, card shows. That visibility gives a new sense of power that gold just doesn't anymore. But let's also talk some numbers here and how economics ties into the numbers. So from 2019 to 2021, gold rose by about 40%, whereas a first edition Charizard skyrocketed 900% from $25,000 to over $250,000. And in finance, that type of rapid price increase screams bubble dynamics. This price is no longer driven by fundamentals. It is driven by momentum and belief, and economists call this irrational exuberance. This is when investors pile in, not because of real value, but because they think prices will keep rising forever. In theory, markets are meant to be efficient, therefore prices should reflect an asset's true value. But behavioral economics show that humans do not act like rational robots. We chase trends, we chase clout, we chase approval. As a result, we just FOMO into things, and that's why we see herd mentality take action. Price rises, more people dive in. Price rises, more people dive in. And people feel like they have to buy or they will be left behind. Rationally and on paper, it makes zero sense. But in practice, all markets, not just Pokemon, not just collectibles, but even stock markets, all powered by this human psychology. And a collectible like Charizard is just the perfect example of this irrational behavior. Now let's get on to the disclaimer, the big catch of this video. You see, gold's value is anchored by thousands of years of history, and on top of that, it has practical uses: jewelry, technology, and currency reserve. Whereas Charizard's value, it's cultural, it's pure belief. Now, economists would therefore call Charizard a confidence-based asset. This means it only holds value if enough people think it should. And that is risky, because if future generations don't connect to Charizards or just general Pokemon in the same way millennials and Gen Z do, then the price of the asset will drop, not steadily, I'm talking rapid and sharp decline. And that is where the greater fool theory comes into play. This is where people pay higher prices assuming someone else, aka a greater fool, will pay even more later. It can drive prices higher and higher, but only works until the last person stops buying. And this is what we also covered on episode 1 of the Pokéconomics series, where we answered the question, are we in a bubble? Therefore, it seems like Charizard is valuable because we say it's valuable, but beliefs can change in an instant. So where do we wrap up on episode 2, which I feel like has been more doom and gloom than episode 1? Well, Charizard might be worth more than gold right now, but that doesn't mean it's a safe asset to be holding. Scarcity, nostalgia, and status have definitely turned this piece of cardboard into one of the most valuable assets in the world. But remember, if you are buying a piece of Pokemon, you're not investing into a safe asset. What you are actually investing in is into culture and irrational human behavior. And you can take that as either a positive or a negative, because it can go either way, meaning these things can be priceless or be zero overnight. Thanks for watching episode 2 of Pokéconomics, where cardboard meets capitalism. I hope you enjoyed this video and let me know your thoughts down below. And if you want to make sure you catch episode 3, make sure to hit that subscribe button.